This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Welcome, Talk Catholic, the website.com, your host, Tim Kilcoyne. No agendas here, just the straight and narrow, through Mary to Jesus, the Catholic faith proclaimed and preserved. Hope to see you here every week. Talk Catholic, Tim Kilcoyne in summertime. Did you get your golf lesson yet? That was the topic last week in our first session of Fairways to Faith. And we will continue onward with that wonderful model for life and living. We'll get back to reclaiming Catholic masculinity the Habsburg way. The Archduke of Habsburg is going to tell you what works for over 800 and something years within his family lineage. So in any event, I was just reflecting on last session when we were talking at the ultimate ABCs of making some progress for excelling at anything is docility. Oh, I love that word, docility, and openness to newness. Our Lord talked about making all things new. Are we open to that? Because as we heard from Father Michael Linder in the book, Golf and the Spiritual Life, he wasn't too open too often. And I raised the issue of, I can mention ever so many people that I've given golf lessons to over the years that just fought me. Oh my goodness. They thought they had it. And they were still hitting the ball sideways, but, I hope I helped them to hit it a little less sideways because I have a feeling many of them wanted to hit it sideways.
As long as they were doing it their way.
The adult propensity for dick in the mudness. Can we use that expression? Just like, not me, as I say so often when it comes to family issues. Not my family. Not me, no, you maybe, but not me. I'm thinking of a very good friend who's theologically well-versed, faithful to the max, a very devout Catholic, and not too open, not asking a lot of questions. In fact, I'm thinking of two guys that are very much in that same spiritual category. It seems as though they've matured in 100 ways. Except perhaps one of the most important, they won't ask questions.
Now, we know this can be a guy thing, sadly.
About anything. They already know better. Even though, like I mentioned, my friend was on the driving range and he really was hitting the ball sideways. He had no desire to ask me a few questions after 35 plus years of teaching experience.
And I'm not too quick to pressure anybody to ask the question. I mentioned last week, one guy walked off the golf course as soon as I gave him a little tip. He was hitting the ball terribly, and it was going on for like 16 holes. And then finally, I just gave him a little tip on his posture, and he walked away. He left. And he said, next time, save it to the 18th hole. Oh, boy.
Oh, my goodness. As I've said before, give me a 17-year-old any day of the week over these so-called adults. We're something else. And this is a major obstacle to the spiritual life because the parallels, as I mentioned, I delight in being a teaching professional and Catholic religious educator because I know that everything that I'm teaching goes against the grain. Everything I teach pretty much, goes against human nature. And it's good for you. And I'm called to present that knowledge.
Pray for me.
So I have to stay with it and just do my job. And I don't do it in any condescending way, thank the Lord. I do it as a matter of the gifts that he's given me by way of my parents and the education they gave to me. And it's all good. And to whom much is given, more expected. So I enjoy every minute of being able to bring a little joy to you, to your life, by way of hitting a little white ball straight to the target and or walking with the Lord joyfully.
straight to heaven, preferably.
And thankfully for me, the two go together. When you take a golf lesson from me, you're getting more than a golf lesson. In any event, in the last session, Father Michael was talking very much about his own resistance to just getting to the lesson tee, taking a lesson. We can't start anywhere unless we get there. And he says, good players have an approach to lessons that differs somewhat from mine. In the first place, they take them. Unlike me, they know that no one can develop and maintain a decent swing unless he has a teacher, someone who knows him and his game, someone who can notice even slight variations in a swing and can suggest remedies when it breaks down. Good players actually welcome lessons and the constructive criticisms that they generate. They know that they would become hopelessly lost if they insisted on going it alone without the assistance of others. The best players even seek instruction at the first sign of trouble, thereby minimizing the chances that their games will disappear from view. I, on the other hand, was hopelessly lost with no discernible game in sight, and I had been in this fix since I had first picked up a club. Worse than that, I didn't know that I was lost, even though the results of my swing often contained incontrovertible evidence that this was so. As I said, I had deluded myself into thinking that my swing was fine, and I didn't want anything out of the ordinary, like the truth, to get in the way of the image I carried around in my head.
And by the way, we're getting a tutelage right here on sin and how it works in the head.
Though I needed instruction, I preferred to pretend that I did not. And when reality finally crashed through all of my illusions, and it became obvious that I needed help, I was embarrassed, as if the need for instruction made me somewhat defective. I now know that recognizing the need for instruction is perhaps the first step toward improving your game. In other words, no one becomes Jack Nicklaus simply by being born. Golf is far too complicated a game to master. Better players realize that to a great degree. Progress is directly proportional to the desire to seek out and to accept the best help available. This is known as enlightenment. Let me just pause there. I'm thinking, first of all, there are those in the church, for instance, who think that everybody's the same. Doesn't matter what parish you go to. All the priests they're priests. What difference does it make which one you hear? Oh boy, what difference does it make? I'm not even going to go there. No, you seek out those who are of greater wisdom and holiness.
And it does make a world of difference.
And then you have a chance of growing in abundance. You have a much better chance of leaping hurdles you never thought you could with a good tutor, a good role model, a good teacher. This is critical in the spiritual life. Unfortunately, in days gone by, you only heard the expression spiritual director when it came to seminarians in formation, or perhaps a priest, talking about his spiritual director. You never heard lay Catholics talking that way about their spiritual director. Tragic. Everybody needs a mirror. Everybody has to be able to see themselves, not as they see themselves, but as someone from the outside sees them.
In fact, I pray for the illumination of conscience often, because the world has become so wicked and evil that we simply need to know how God sees us. And that's what that's all about.
And this is so true with regard to conflict resolution and trying to sift through some of the difficulties of family life and dysfunctional ways of living. How are you going to get there if you're not willing to admit that there's a problem? This is a huge issue for a lot of people, like maybe most. The idea that there's something not right and it needs to be fixed, and we need to communicate about it in order to fix it. No. We just need to have a drink and sit back and enjoy the game. But believe me, that is the attitude of too many people. So in any event, this is so true, I'm thinking of Father John. He's a good friend of mine of many, many, many years, a Franciscan, great, faithful Catholic, extremely wise in all of his ways.
And only 92 now and going on full throttle. at his particular monastery. People are utterly dependent on him still.
I'm just so lucky to be close to him physically and geographically that I can see him often at my desire practically. What a gift. What an absolute gift he is to me. And he's known me for probably 40-something years, maybe more. But I go to him for the littlest things, not out of utter scrupulosity. I just know that he knows me. He knows my tendencies of character, of personality, temperament, etc. Therefore, I can talk about deep nuances of the spiritual life that those of us who have been at it in the battle, in the trenches for a long time for our Lord, we recognize the evil one, first of all. We acknowledge his existence and that he goes after the righteous. He doesn't go after those that are in his back pocket. And then you have to discern many things by the gift of discernment, not science. Sometimes we just have to connect the dots intuitively, and it's very similar in the golf swing. That's what I love about it, is that not everybody has the same physique, has the same temperament, and indeed the same swing. There are many different swings that can get it done, and that's good news. Like the unique snowflakes that we all are, there are many different ways of hitting a golf ball well with your physique and abilities, psychologically and otherwise. And as a good teacher, I need to be aware of as many of those swings as possible. I don't try to just drive somebody into a mold that I like.
Very good wisdom for any evangelist amongst us.
And that is too often our problem as teaching professionals. We typically give our swing theory to everybody. And that's not fair. It's actually my belief that virtually everybody's kind of born with a skeleton of a swing, your swing. And we got to find it, because you're going to find that you really don't deviate much from it based on your body and how you're made and your athleticism, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very similar in the spiritual life, that as you try to climb Jacob's ladder and go up and up and up and up and up, you become more attentive to little things that most people have no clue about. I mean, if you ever saw my notes on a little practice session at the range and the little things that I'm working on, and every time at the end of the session, I write them down in my little cell phone in my notes section. And by the end of the year, I virtually have written a book of the multiple ways of hitting a golf ball. I got to get to that book, that's for darn sure. In any event, let me just continue on with Father Michael speaking about himself in humility. In golf, as in other areas of life, it never hurts to take a lesson, since it's one of the better ways to discover the truth about ourselves and to minimize our faults. Shying away from a little help is a sure sign that we prefer delusion to an honest appraisal of ourselves. It's also a remarkably clever way to place obstacles along the path to fulfillment. An example of a different kind demonstrates what I mean. I don't dance very well. In fact, I don't dance much at all, solely because of my aversion to asking for the help that I need. As I was becoming a teenager, it became clear to me that I would at one point be expected to dance with someone before I moved on to college. This created a problem for me. In a curious reversal of my belief about my golf swing, I knew that I would appear awkward if I stepped onto the dance floor. I needed no evidence. I was sure that I would invite ridicule if I tried to even do a few steps. I had very little excuse not to learn, because more than willing teacher was living in my house. My younger sister, who has never shunned a challenge in her life, was a good dancer, and she was determined to show me how. As it turned out, however, her desire to help me was no match for my stubborn refusal to accept anything other than my version of the truth. And the truth, according to me, was that I couldn't do it. As a result, I navigated my way through adolescence by steering clear of danger, and my sister as well, only occasionally getting my feet wet with a slow dance or two. I missed out on a lot of fun because I wouldn't subject my version of the truth to a little scrutiny. And you wonder why religious people too often don't know how to have fun? This is exactly it right here. They may be orthodox and devout and go through all the motions beautifully, but it still is their way or the highway, and they think they can do it solo. No man is an island. It's still true. But, I'm thinking of a priest friend, and I hope he's not listening. But he virtually never returns a text message. And I confronted him one time, ever gently, and his response was, "I only respond if I think I need to." Oh, really? I had to remind him that I know he wears a collar, but he doesn't get a different playbook. It's called etiquette. It's called manners. All right, and it's kind of a universal thing. We're all subject to follow the right way of doing things, just out of basic courtesy.
Too much? Not.
No, this is stubborn muleness, human nature that we're talking about, no matter what it is, what the subject, and what your state of life is, too. Doesn't matter. But I will say, the older you are, the more stuck in your ways. It's always been known to be true. So, in any event, he goes on and says that he finally took a golf lesson. And we won't be able to go into too much detail. We'll get back to it next week. But he says, when I met the teacher at the practice range, he did something that I've never forgotten. He asked to shake hands, so I took his hand and squeezed it with my usual end-of-the-world grip. I had always supposed that firmness in a handshake was measured in pounds of pressure per square inch, and my teacher winced as we stood there in the afternoon sunlight. I could tell that he was impressed, and I expected him to say something like, "Well, you certainly have a manly handshake there." Instead, he started by saying that if I used the same stranglehold on a golf club that I had applied to his hand, my grip pressure was the first thing I needed to change. He had no idea what he was getting into. The lesson was clearly getting off on the wrong foot, and we'll get off on the right foot next week. This is WQPH Radio 89.3 FM on the other side.
Building a wholesome family in a broken world.
With the Archduke of Austria. Well, there was one common theme in the midst of all the books that I have concerning reclaiming Catholic masculinity. It is absolutely the importance of chastity. We heard it especially espoused by Kennedy Hall in his book, Terror of Demons. And now we hear it once again from the Archduke of Austria.
After 800 plus years of successful continuity in his family lineage.
And relative to last week and the examples of imperial chastity, he was saying, the Habsburg examples of marriage teach us something else. The chastity of these imperial singles did not stem from some strange cult of virginity, although undoubtedly they wanted to avoid having children before marriage. Rather, it was an expression of a lived Catholic faith that warned that having intimate relationships before marriage is a deadly sin and a threat to eternal salvation. The temptation of lust is powerful. It requires spiritual strength to resist. I strongly believe that to live a chaste lifestyle requires that you have a strong faith life as well. But you must learn your faith before you can live it. Habsburg parents instilled the faith in their children's heads at a very tender age and taught them very well about the meaning of life, love, and marriage. Indeed, these lessons should be learned early in life before young adults ever enter the chaotic and frenzied arena of contemporary dating and marriage. Parents bear a terrible responsibility if children are abandoned to the influence of school administrators and the pressures of peer groups, or worse, if parents themselves encourage their children to have boyfriends or girlfriends prematurely. Those parents are not only pointing them down the path of unhappiness, but are endangering their own souls. And if parents are reluctant to parent their children because they don't want conflict with them, or they want to be their children's best friend, they are not fulfilling their duty. Parents should not shrug and parrot the old cliche, "That's just the way it is today." They should try harder. Their children are their children. Parents owe this to their children. Now, here's something very specific parents can do for their children. Before their children become teenagers, ideally long before, parents can encourage them to pray every day in their evening prayers for their future spouse. I did this when I was young. My wife did the same. I am sure our marriage is so happy because of it. Well, one of the great tragedies of our day today is within the church, we have people high up who completely diminish the importance of chastity. At the Fatima apparition, Our Lady made it clear to Jacinta, one of the seers, that more souls go to hell because of sins of the flesh, carnal sin, than any other. And now we have a hierarchy that are of the baby boom age spectrum who are of that old rebellious generation that doesn't want to talk about sex. We want to talk about climate change, and we want to talk about the redistribution of wealth and goods and services, because somehow or another we beat people over the head with
This sex stuff.
years ago and it didn't work, and thus Our Lady was wrong? No. Our Lady is always right. And our hierarchy is currently very wrong and not highlighting the importance of chastity as almost virtually everything towards character development. Becoming the best version of yourself that you possibly can be is not going to be brought about by the redistribution of wealth and services or what's going on in the climate. It has way more to do with what you're doing with yourself, your body, your mind, your soul.
And the three are completely interconnected.
And it is absolutely no coincidence that if a person is in sin, and yes, that is a good old-fashioned expression that's still current today. If a person is living in sin sexually, believe me, they don't want to talk about God. If there is anything that separates the soul, the estrangement of the soul from our Lord, it is exactly when a person is going beyond the boundaries that are proper to them sexually. And I can speak to this because I've lived a whole life. Yes, indeed. I'm not a priest. I'm a regular guy that lives chastely.
Never married.
I've dated many. I've still lived chastely. How's that? It's, I would say, the absolute heart of my spiritual life and the font of His wisdom. God's infused wisdom, which is what I rely on in doing this show mostly, has everything to do with my chastity.
Because He knows by His grace that I'm worthy to be an open vessel for His word.
My being alone with God
Through the years so often,
and staying true to His calling to me to stay chaste and be His for others. The fact that there's virtually nothing said about premarital sex or any other form of perverted sex from our local homily is a sacrilege. It's a disgrace. It's absolutely a shirking of one's responsibility as a shepherd to guide the faithful, to shepherd the flock in the right direction. This is the sin of our time, and they're hiding behind the issues of so-called social justice. The great issue of social justice or injustice is that we're simply not hearing anything about sexual sin, not just today, but in virtually my whole lifetime, where it matters the most, at church on Sunday. Oh, indeed. Don't throw rocks at me, fellow colleagues. You have the same responsibility that I have right here, if you really do care about flesh and blood, even though it's not your own.
but it is.
What makes you a father. Final words from the Archduke. Let me lay my cards on the table. I think your best chance for a happy marriage and a happy life is to marry a devout Catholic, and even more important, to be or become Catholic yourself. This should not surprise you. I am Catholic and I believe in my faith. It would be much stranger if I were Catholic and I didn't think Catholicism and its teachings on love, marriage, and sexuality had the truest understanding of what makes for a successful lifelong relationship between one man and one woman. I believe that if you give God a voice in your marriage, He will help you and your spouse to love and respect each other and to grow ever more closer to each other. Since a shared faith, ideally a shared Catholic faith, is at the top of my list
Of what to look for in a spouse.
I should add a disclaimer before continuing. Always keep an open mind and consider whether God wants you in a different vocation, a religious vocation. My brother is a priest, my wife's brother is a priest, 2 of my grandfather's brothers were priests, and 2 of his sisters had vocations to the convent. All of these men and women had a profound influence on many of my siblings and cousins. In fact, my family would not look the way it does today if these people had not said, "Yes, here I am, Lord," to God's call. But again, a shared faith is the first thing you should look for in a spouse. And here are a few other things I think are very important. 1, a shared faith, ideally Catholic. 2, the same idea of family and openness to children is a priority in life. 3, a shared idea of chastity and modesty and a generally upright character. 4, a certain complementarity of personality. 5, a similar cultural background which tends to make things simpler, though differences are surmountable if points 1 through 4 are met. Notice I didn't include attractive, sexy, or hot. Life and health take their toll, and there will always be people younger, hotter, and perhaps more physically attractive than your spouse. It's not your spouse's beauty that will carry you through the decades of life's adventures. It is your spouse's heart and soul, faith, and disposition of character. Beauty matters only so much when your baby is crying at 3 in the morning, teething, and has been for the last 2 weeks. Attraction grows with knowledge, respect, and a common experience. I am far more in love with my wife now than when I met her and got engaged.
My mind goes to an old friend, a BC law student who worked on a law project for 4 years with a gal who he had absolutely no attraction to, he told me. They're married today. The mystery of Catholic love. This is WQPH Radio 89.3 FM, guiding you to joy every week. God bless.
Let your light shine. That is what it's all about here at WQPH Radio 89.3 FM. But we need to hear your story. You want your voice to be his voice. That is making the faith known to others. Please, my number is 877-625-3727. Tim Kilcoyne, TalkCatholic.com. Say, Mother Teresa told us, your ministry is your work right where you are. Grab on to this microphone. God bless.